You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The views expressed by the individuals during this broadcast are their own opinions, and they may not be the same as those of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Oh yeah, baby, that's lovely.
Good morning, it's April 8th, and welcome to Psychedelics Cannabis Educational News here at paceradio.net. Good morning, Cindy. How you doing?
Good morning, Al. I'm pretty well. How about yourself?
Oh, not too bad. I know yesterday was an excellent day, and I'm hoping today is as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Are you going to get much view of the eclipse happening this afternoon?
I haven't got a clue. I'm probably going to be too busy doing something in order to be able to even notice it even happening.
Gotcha.
You know how it is.
Yeah,
right?
I do.
All righty. What do you say we get on with the news?
Sounds good.
All righty. Oh, I see.
Are you ready?
I see you got a problem streaming to a location, but that's all right. We can continue with it. So
Okay.
we'll deal with that afterwards. So let's get started with the first story of the day.
Sure. Heading over to CBC News. Medical cannabis hurdles remain in Canada. Here's why.
Yes. When the use of cannabis became legal in Canada more than 5 years ago, there was hope that it would help ease access for medical users of cannabis. But doctors say the evidence for some medical usage is lacking, leaving some patients frustrated. The federal government-run program for medical cannabis started more than 20 years ago. Soon after, patients started to complain it was difficult to find doctors who were on board with giving medical authorizations to obtain their cannabis through official channels. And you know what, Cindy, it continues today.
It sure does, yeah. Some hoped legalization of recreational cannabis in 2018 would also ease hurdles on the medical side, such as learning how effective or ineffective it is for particular conditions, reducing stigma and red tape, as well as prices. But that's not how it worked out for all patients. At Santé Cannabis, a Montreal-based clinic and research center, a nurse calls patients to check in after their first visit for chronic pain from conditions such as osteoarthritis, as well as multiple sclerosis, anxiety, and poor sleep.
To this day, we have patients that are struggling at 1 month to receive their order or to complete the process because it's still so complicated, says Aaron Prozac, the clinic's president and co-founder. She goes on to say she says that the primary example of patients lacking smooth access is how they still have to wait for shipments to come in the mail instead of getting medical cannabis from the pharmacist.
Yeah, because there's only one pharmacy that deals in it, isn't there?
In Canada, yeah.
Yeah. That way.
20 years.
In 20 years. And they only started doing that like in the last, say, 5 or 6 years.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. That way, patients could talk to health professional if they have questions about the dose instead of relying on a sales clerk, Prosk says. Patients also rely on physicians for medical guidance. But a spokesperson for the Canadian Medical Association pointed to its 2020 policy that says the group has consistently expressed concern with the role of gatekeeper that physicians have been asked to take as a result of court decisions.
Yeah, they were saying that 20 years ago, too. For some users of medical cannabis, stigma around the medicine remains an issue, even with the legalization of recreational use in 2018. Asher, who's 23, says he faces misconceptions in the workplace around the use of medical cannabis and wants the protection that comes with a medical access stream to continue.
Yeah, and it's true because I mean, like I just went and did 2 days of first aid training, and you know we're getting down, we're doing all this stuff, getting down on the floor, and for somebody with back problems and knee problems and leg problems, that's very, 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 very painful.
Mhm.
So at breaks and at lunch, I would go out and smoke a joint. And, I got such looks after the first break, and I smelled of cannabis that, like I used my Febreze, but the stigma's gone. Here we are at this first aid training, all about medicine and helping people, and cannabis was still very much looked down upon there.
That's not
It was
good.
crazy. When he was 17, Asher was diagnosed with a learning disability that has symptoms similar to those shown by people with autism. After conventional treatments like psychotherapy didn't improve his difficulty with speaking, a family physician suggested trying medical cannabis in the form of a fine powder delivered in an inhaler-like device, similar to those used by people with asthma. The Halifax resident said that when he first entered the workplace soon after legalization in 2018, he faced stigma in the form of comments about addiction from coworkers around his use of medical cannabis that's low in psychoactive THC. Given how the myths could jeopardize job prospects, CBC News agreed not to use his last name.
The medical stream is not just a method to gain access, Asher says. It's for legitimate medical reasons. It also gives you the ability to have documentation to be protected at work. Asher left his role in the federal service, civil service. Now he's now looking for more recognition in all workplaces of people who have severe disabilities and how medical cannabis can be used to improve performance on the job. Asher hoped legalization would reduce stigma and skepticism about how cannabidiol CBD in cannabis is not psychoactive and doesn't hinder work.
Because my disability impacts my memory and my speech, people naturally think I may be impaired. Even though I tell them medical cannabis is not impairing, he said, I had a boss who asked me, just take the medication to improve your symptoms. A letter Asher received offering him another position said cannabis was prohibited. And Asher said he refrained from using his inhaler. It caused a downward spiral in his ability to work, not using it.
Other patients are looking to physicians to guide them on whether cannabis might be right for them, and if so, how to dose it safely. Dr. Marianne Fritzcharles, a rheumatologist and pain medicine physician at Montreal's McGill University, said use of cannabis to treat lasting pain symptoms is less common now than 20 years ago, when legal access to medical cannabis was introduced.
Yeah, the federal government's monthly tracking of medical cannabis authorizations also shows a decline. What isn't known, but federally licensed sellers were at about 366,000 in 2019, peaked off roughly 377,000 in September of 2020 during COVID pandemic emergency, and then declined to 188, just over 188,000 in September of 2023.
I do have a question about a word in that sentence.
Okay.
Why isn't known, but federal licensed sellers? These are people who are growing medical cannabis for themselves or designated growers. At those numbers, 366,000 people. So that's yeah. Fitzgerald pointed to lack of effectiveness, high costs, and side effects as reasons people turn away from medical cannabis. Practice and research on effectiveness, patients may say in surveys that cannabis helps control their pain or inflammation, but those effects may not pan out in better designed studies like randomized trials.
As a physician, I will have some patients who say that it really does make a difference, such as people with rheumatic disease. She said, the question is this real or is this a placebo effect? Use of cannabis by people who have cancer is one of the most established areas of medical research on the product, she said.
In March, the federal government's expert panel reviewing the Cannabis Act made recommendations in various areas, including medical cannabis, to address the hurdle of not knowing what a particular form of cannabis effectively treats. The panel called to move beyond a distinct medical access program so that cannabis is considered within standard drug approval pathways and part of the conventional medical care.
That way, medical cannabis products would have a Health Canada DIN, Drug Identification Number, as other medications do, showing it has been evaluated and authorized for sale in Canada. The panel's recommendation addressed some of the other hurdles Fitzcharles identified, including effectiveness and high costs. And the panel is recommending allowing cannabis product sales in pharmacies to people with medical authorization, removing the excise tax from medical cannabis, about time. They should give us a refund for all of that too. Supporting clinical guidance documents for healthcare professionals on medical use of cannabis.
Yeah, there was one point there I just wanted to mention that in order for it to get a DIN number, Health Canada would have to recognize that it's medical cannabis, and unfortunately, they don't recognize the medical benefits of cannabis yet. Yeah. A report last week from Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Balancing Act on all of society approach to substance use and harms, expands these recommendations, including a suggestion of limits on potency, considering tiered taxation based on the THC content, and establishing a standard unit of cannabis to improve surveillance and research on cannabis. Finding a standard product is one barrier to doing studies because cannabis is such a complex mix of compounds, says Fitzgerald.
Yes, both Fitzcharles and Prosk at Santé Cannabis continue to field questions about misconceptions of the medicine. Prost said governments treat cannabis like alcohol and tobacco, but it's our first legal psychoactive substance that has both medical and recreational application, she said. I think that has been sort of the fundamental challenge for the government and regulators to balance.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it looks like right now, anyways, patients are on the losing end of that balance because there's things that we've lost out on.
Yeah.
But, keep on doing what we're doing and keep voicing our opinions, and hopefully we can get some changes done. But more on that soon. All right, on to our next story. Here it comes.
Yeah, coming to us from MJ Biz Daily. Canada's cancelled licenses. Uncollectible cannabis taxes soar.
Oh, the number of canceled cannabis businesses licenses have soared alongside the amount of uncollectible excise tax in Canada. At least 123 federal cannabis business licenses either were canceled or pending cancellation in 2023, according to new data provided to MJ Biz Daily.
That figure is almost triple the number of licenses canceled in 2022. Companies with canceled licenses are unable to cultivate, produce, package, or possess non-duty paid cannabis legally. The data paints a picture of an industry facing micro and macroeconomic challenges, many of which were spelled out in briefing materials for Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland and obtained through an access to information request.
The latest CRA data shows that at least 212 licenses were canceled between federal cannabis legalization in June of 2018 and February 29 of 2024, with 58% of the cancellations happening in 2023 alone. Tanner Stewart, co-founder and CEO of cannabis license holder Stewart Farms in New Brunswick, suggested the excise tax is a contributing factor to companies exiting the industry.
At the end of the day, the excise tax is so severe that it truly impacts your balance sheet from a margin perspective, he told MJ Biz Daily on a phone interview. Health Canada's website currently lists 982 licensed producers.
Wow. I remember when there was one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the amount of unpaid tax owed by cannabis companies that has been deemed uncollectible or potentially uncollectible has soared of late, largely because of insolvencies. Uncollectible duty approached $50 million as of February 29th, according to the CRA data shows. That's an 11% increase from approximately $45 million a year ago.
The uncollectible or potentially uncollectible duty equals around 5% of the government's total estimated cannabis duty. In the 2022-23 fiscal year ending on March 31st, federal excise duties from cannabis amounted to roughly $894.6 million, of which $667.6 million was transferred to provincial and territorial coffers.
So the federal government kept what, 230 million of it. Split the rest. Yeah. The CRA tracks and collectible duty because of insolvency and canceled licenses. Duty loss through insolvency increased to $38 million as of February the 29th, a 52% increase compared to 11 months earlier, when it was $23 million was deemed uncollectible because of insolvencies.
Wow. About half of all licensed cannabis producers in Canada have excise debt, the CRA data shows. In total, 171 out of 355 licenses, or 48%, owed money to the CRA as of February 29th this year, with the total duty amounting to $262 million.
Wow, this never ends, all these big numbers. That is a small decline from the $273 million owed as of December 29th, 2023, which at that time marked a 72% increase compared to the figure from about 1 year earlier. A small number of companies accounted for most of the debt.
Yeah.
And
you can see a little table there. The levy charged to Canada's cannabis business is so high that the federal government is increasingly among the top unpaid creditors of insolvent cultivars, according to MJ Biz Daily, review on insolvency filings. That has forced some companies to adapt their business strategies. Stewart said he pivoted the business from adult use cannabis to the medical and export sectors to avoid large excise tax bills.
Oh, they're not being charged excess tax on the medical end of things?
I guess.
Oh. We work with a few medical platforms, he says, because that's a business-to-business transaction, not involving a wholesaler. We don't have to worry about accumulation of excise debt, and we're focused on exports to Australia. Coming into 2024 as a small craft supplier, we did an assessment on what was lowering our margins, and we realized it wasn't worth it to stay in the Canadian domestic recreational market with our smokable products. So we pivoted to medical cannabis in Canada.
Nice. Well, I guess that's one good thing coming out of the excise tax. Yeah, Stewart takes issue with the executives of large publicly traded cannabis companies calling for the CRA to crack down on rival businesses that are behind on their taxes. How many companies that have been posting permanent losses paid their excise tax from just from investors, he said. You can't say give us excise reform and also crack down more aggressively on businesses.
There you go. Done. Yeah. Not looking good. You see all those numbers. Geez, they really went up, obviously, over the last year.
It's a lot of money. But the one company going strictly medical because of it is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's kind of cool because that's not something that you hear of too often. So it's usually the other way. All right, here we go. On to our next story.
Over to CTV News, Vancouver. Vancouver City Councillors propose motion to regulate mushroom dispensaries. Go, Dana Larson.
I can hear Dana just go, whoa! Yeah. 2, Vancouver City Councillors are tabling a motion to regulate medical mushroom stores in the city. In their motion, Green councillors Pete Fry and Aaron Carr state Vancouver has seen a number of unlicensed and unregulated retail shops selling magic mushrooms and other ethogens rapidly increase in recent years.
Fry told CTV News, if passed, the motion would direct staff to create a plan that would address when and where stores operate and prohibit sales to minors. As a city, we don't have any role to sort of designate the legal statutes of controlled substance, but what we do have the powers to do is put in a framework around how a business operates. So that's the idea of the mushroom dispensaries, he said. We're here to stay. Dana Larson, the director of a nonprofit that oversees 3 mushroom dispensaries in Vancouver, said he thinks regulation could be a great first step.
Yeah, I think they did similar to this with the cannabis before cannabis became legal. I'm sure we'll find out. Now, Dana says, whether you support or oppose these kinds of shops being there, the reality is we're here, and we're here to stay. According to the motion, the plan would be to model the licensing after what the city of Vancouver did in 2015 with cannabis stores. That year, it introduced the medical marijuana-related uses framework.
Yeah. Larson said he had some issues with how cannabis stores were licensed, but that he'd rather see bylaws introduced as opposed to blanket prohibition. Before they licensed cannabis shops, there were over 100 in the city operating without a license, he said. With mushroom shops like ours, there's at least 20 I know of operating without a license. Jeremy
Jacob, a co-owner of the Village Bloomery, said watching what's unfolding in the mushroom industry reminds him of what he went through nearly 10 years ago when his cannabis shop was licensed. He said if the city of Vancouver eventually decides to go through with regulations, he hopes they make some changes. For example, he says, the restriction in certain commercial zones where you can have every other business type but a cannabis dispensary means that cannabis shops cluster in the approved zones. So this really enhances competition in those areas. It means that other areas are unserviced. That definitely shouldn't be repeated if they go ahead with regulated mushroom shops.
Yep. ABC councilperson Mike Klassen said this green-led initiative isn't a priority for the city right now. Klassen was the lone ABC member who was outnumbered at a March meeting that saw Carr and Fry vote to reinstate Larson's dispensary license. The particular matter is, again, something that needs to be dealt with through a federal level and not a city council meeting, he said. And the motion will be voted on April 10th in 2 days.
There you go. Yeah, I imagine. You can hear Dana. Yay!
Yeah. I'm pretty sure he was one of those cannabis dispensaries that was open back then doing the same thing he's doing now.
Yeah, I would think so. I'm thinking he probably was. All right, here we go. On to our next story.
Coming to us from High Times, it's a study. U.S. medical cannabis laws increase patients' mental health.
Hey, nice. Researchers from the University of Basel in Switzerland recently published a study on April the 2nd to analyze how medical cannabis legalization in the U.S. has affected the country and its patients' well-being. Entitled Medical Marijuana Laws and Mental Health in the United States, researchers wanted to determine the effects of medical cannabis policies on patients over time. The consequences of legal access to medical marijuana for individuals' well-being are controversial assessed. Researchers wrote, we contribute to the decision by evaluating the impact of the introduction of medical marijuana laws across the U.S. states on self-reported mental health, considering different motives for cannabis consumption.
Researchers analyzed the responses of 7.9 million people who participated in phone surveys between 1993 and 2018. This information was collected through the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System, which focuses on data collection regarding mental well-being. In addition to this, researchers also utilized data collected by the National Survey on Drug Use and Health. Participants were placed in specific groups, such as those who were highly likely to abstain from using cannabis, to using cannabis as a recreational drug, or to using it for medical reasons, in order to determine the overall effect of medical cannabis legalization on their mental health. Additionally, researchers took into account the use of cannabis specifically for overall chronic pain.
Mental health was measured by asking participants to self-assess themselves by recording how many days they encountered mental health problems during the month prior to the assessment. Ultimately, researchers found that medical cannabis legalization had no effect on either recreational consumers or youth. We find weak evidence of positive effects on mental health due to the liberalization of medical marijuana for the U.S. population overall. Researchers wrote in their conclusion. While the estimated overall reduction in poor mental health days is not statistically significant, the result still applies on absence of evidence for the critically perspectives that highlight the risks of aggravated mental health problems due to medical marijuana laws being introduced.
Easier access improves the mental health of individuals who use cannabis for medical reasons, stated the University of Basel Press article. The same applies to people who are very likely to suffer from pain. The study authors estimate that these two groups spend 0.3 days less per month in poor mental health due to the change in the law. Professor Alois Sulzer summarized these findings in his own statement as well. Overall, our results show that medical cannabis legislation in the USA benefits the people it is intended for without harming other groups, he said. He explained that recreational cannabis consumers aren't worse off after legalization either. And ultimately, there is a clear relationship between liberalization and mental well-being.
Yeah, people aren't worried about getting arrested and thrown in jail like they used to be. So that's obviously an improvement. Both the U.S. and Switzerland both share a federal government structure. While Stutzer calls the most recent survey an experimental article because it can help pave the way towards more studies that analyze Switzerland's future cannabis industry. The most recent study only extended to data collected prior to 2018. So it would be interesting to see a future study analyze even more recent data that accompanies the many other states that have legalized medical or adult use cannabis within the last 5 years.
Switzerland has been conducting isolated cannabis pilot programs to analyze consumer trends, sales patterns, and more. Recently, at the end of March, the first data connected to one of these programs was released. The Zurican study includes 1,928 people who have been approved to purchase cannabis for the study. The newest data shared that the current participants, 80.7 are men, 18% are women, and 1% are non-binary. The demographic disparity was not a surprise. However, as researchers expected, there to be a vast difference in gender-related consumers. Additionally, researchers found that participants between the ages of 28 and 32 represented the highest percentage among all age groups. The average age of consumers is currently 35 years old. Participation in the study seems to be particularly attractive for people who consume frequently, researchers wrote. However, people who only consume cannabis a few times a month also take part in the study. This will allow us to compare people with different consumption habits in our study.
The program data also showed that 6,500 sales have been made so far, with approximately 309 pounds of cannabis sold. And this is Tobias Finger, the head of the marketing Cannabigaea, a company that is working directly with the Swiss Federal Office on Public Health, told Forbes about the significance of this early data. He says the initial data from the pilot published this month reveals promising insights into the regulated cannabis market's functionality and its acceptance among participants. This level of engagement indicates a positive reception and effective distribution system, setting a solid foundation for informing cannabis policy and regulations. So it's good to see that people's mental health did not decline because the state legalized cannabis.
Yeah.
Right. All right, we got one more story before we go to break. All right, and there's a reason we have to do this one. All right, here we go.
Yeah, heading over to Cannabis Prospect Magazine, Toronto's Global Marijuana March, and this is the only time I really use the word marijuana, coming back to Queen's Park this May on the 25th anniversary of original event.
You know, that picture looks really familiar. I'm not sure. I'm just saying it looks familiar. Legacy leaders of Toronto's cannabis scene, pioneers in the fight for medical and recreational cannabis, recently announced the return of an important event in the culture. After a long hiatus, years that include the many changes that recreational legalization brought to the scene followed by the pandemic, the legendary Global Marijuana March will be back on the lawn of Queen's Park on May the 4th, starting at 11 o'clock, and it goes until 5 with the big celebration at 4:20.
Amazing. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that'll be exciting. After the traditional gathering on the lawn of the Ontario Legislature buildings at Queen's Park in Toronto, attendees will make their way through the downtown streets. Some observers may question why cannabis enthusiasts are making their presence known in the way they did before the plant was legalized coast to coast. Celebrated in over 500 cities worldwide on the same day, the GMM is here to celebrate cannabis and culture. Much like LGBTQ pride celebrations continue after the country recognized gay marriages, the Global Marijuana March highlights cannabis culture in Canada and abroad, where it is still largely criminalized. In countries where it is legal, there are still shortcomings, and so we highlight how people and opportunities fall between the cracks, and there is still stigma.
Yeah, there is still stigma. And as the article questions, well, why would people still need to be, cannabis legalized? Why would they still need to march? Well, think about it. Before cannabis was legalized, we were asking for cannabis law reform. Cannabis is now illegal, but not everybody's happy with it. There's a lot of mistakes, a lot of things that need to be corrected. So we're still protesting for cannabis law reform.
Yeah.
Right? But the Global Marijuana March, just so you know, is looking for people to create videos that says, I march for, and explain why you march. Where would you march, Cindy?
I would march for all of those that have CPTSD, that this medicine helps to stay alive.
There you go. See, we all have our reasons why we march. So, all right, off we go to break. And we'll be right back. Seeing how we'll continue after that commercial. You're watching Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News here on the Pace Radio Network. You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net. Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, open Monday to Friday from 10 till 7 p.m. or by chance. Check out our flags, our t-shirts, plus our hats, and look of that supply of rolling papers, plus much more. We've got bongs and your favorite herbal vaporizers. Look at all the incense we have, as well as for those who collect knives, check out these knives in our collection. And while you're here, stop in to see Shay at the piercing room, where you can get poked by Shay. Daily deals, check them out. Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford, Ontario.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, Legacy for 20, it's so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420, enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products, make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
What do you find at paceradio.net? People advocating cannabis education.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420. You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net. Hey, we're back. Time for us to bring you some more stories. What do you got here, Cindy? We got 5 more. See if we can get them all done. We're going to 5 more. We're going to be going to the U.S. We're going to be talking BC. We're going to go to Hawaii, where cannabis has been canceled.
You know, I'm so glad we have this chat.
Yeah, exactly. All right, here we go. We'll go get started.
Coming to us from Marijuana Moment, the DOJ says state cannabis legalization boosts tourism in court filing seeking dismissal of industry lawsuit.
Hey, one of the benefits of cannabis, who knew, right? The Justice Department is again asking a federal court to dismiss a lawsuit from medical cannabis companies seeking to block enforcement of prohibition against state legal activities, in part because the government says cannabis legalization attracts out-of-state tourism, empowering it to intervene under the Constitution. In a filing with the U.S. District Court for the District of Massachusetts, Western Division on Friday, DOJ contested claims from the cannabis corporations that federal policy is at odds with the government's enforcement practices, and it also argued that the plaintiffs lack standing to raise the lawsuit in the first place.
Plaintiffs argue that federal cannabis policy is no longer serves a goal of eradicating the cannabis trade. Yet, even if that is true, curtailing the cannabis trade is a legitimate objective, regardless of whether the government pursues that objective to the point of eradication. It's a lot. Plaintiffs also cannot show that any way in which federal cannabis policy is irrational. When they allege that federal policy focuses law enforcement resources on cannabis activities that most implicate vital federal interests, such as preventing violence and protecting public safety, it added.
The underlying suit against the federal government is being led by multi-state operator Verano Holdings Corp. And Massachusetts-based cannabis businesses Canada Provisions and Wiseacre Farm, along with Trevet Geo Gaisa Sellers. They're represented by the law firms Boyce Schuler and Flexer LLP and Lesser Newman Allo and Nasser LLP. Litigator David Boyles, whose list of prior clients include the Justice Department, former Vice President Al Gore, and the plaintiffs in the case that led to the invalidation of California's ban on same-sex marriage, is leading the suit.
DOJ said in the latest filing that the plaintiffs lack jurisdiction in the suit, partly because they cannot establish a credible threat of future enforcement of the Controlled Substances Act. While they allege that the Department of Justice has a policy not to prosecute their alleged conduct. Pardon me. Because they allege that the Department of Justice adheres to a policy of not prosecuting those who engage in plaintiffs' conduct, they cannot establish a credible threat of future enforcement, the filing says.
What's going to happen? Yeah. And I got to find my page. It jumped on me. Okay, I'm getting there.
It's okay.
Past there, back there. Filing says, there we are. There we go. DOJ makes several notable admissions in this latest document. However, for example, it contests that the idea that plaintiffs are harmed under prohibition because it has resulted in the reluctance of banks to work with their interstate businesses, pointing out that the department has not taken to coerce any other third parties who have declined to transact with plaintiffs. What's against the law? And they do not and cannot dispute that the complainant alleges that the same third parties have decided to transact with plaintiffs, while others have declined to do it, he says.
The department also asserts that the lower court does not have jurisdiction to undermine a 2005 Supreme Court decision, Gonzalez versus Ryak, in which justices held that state-level cannabis laws do not protect people from federal prosecution because of Congress's interest in preventing illegal cannabis from entering interstate commerce. Ryak's constitutional holding is controlling here because the Supreme Court is the only court with the power to overrule its holding in Ryak, which would be necessary to sustain plaintiff's commerce clause and necessary and proper clause claim, the filing says.
Even if Rick's ultimate holding were not directly controlling here, the CSA's application to plaintiffs falls well within Congress's authority under the Commerce Clause and Necessary and Proper Clause. Plaintiffs do not and cannot dispute that the Supreme Court's case law under these clauses firmly establish Congress' power to regulate purely local activities that are part of an economic class activities that have substantial effect on the interstate commerce. Get all that?
Right. Part of DOJ's reasoning here, did you just read that? No. Here is that it claims...
No.
Sorry, my page is jumping on me. I apologize. That claims it is rational to conclude... that the regulated cannabis industry in Massachusetts fuels a different kind of cannabis-related interstate commerce, cannabis tourism. That is especially so because Massachusetts cannabis businesses gross hundreds of millions of dollars in sales each year, and dispensaries such as Canna Provisions cater to out-of-state customers, it states.
In other words, while the plaintiff's claim is that the Constitution's Commerce Clause should preclude DOJ from interfering in state legal activity because it is centrally regulated within the state's borders, legalization attracts cannabis tourism from people from states without legal programs who would prefer to buy from regulated storefronts. As the Supreme Court held decades ago, Congress has the authority to regulate businesses that cater to tourists from out of state, even if the business's transaction occur wholly in state, the DOJ said in the new filing.
It is also argued that this rational basis also exists to conclude that despite what the plaintiffs describe as strict controls in Massachusetts systems, some portion of the cannabis produced in Massachusetts will be diverted into the illicit market. Experience has shown that even where states impose controls on regulated cannabis, some diversions occur.
The department further disputed the plaintiff's position that congressional rider preventing the use of DOJ funds to interfere in state medical cannabis programs call into question the propriety of ongoing federal prohibition. These laws rationally serve the purposes of avoiding friction between the federal government and the state governments and allowing the states to develop a body of experience in dealing with medical cannabis that can inform future decisions by federal policymakers and policy makers in other states about whether to enact further changes to cannabis policy, it said.
Similarly, cited an Obama-era memo generally directing federal prosecutors not to interfere with state cannabis laws, which was later rescinded during the Trump administration, saying the alleged policy to focus law enforcement resources on important federal interests is manifestly rational on its face. This all comes in the background of a DEA review into cannabis scheduling under the CSA. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has recommended moving cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3.
And while the Biden administration has maintained that people should not be criminalized over possession or use of cannabis, DOJ has continued to fight reform efforts in courts, including this current case on broad prohibition, as well as litigation, challenging the ban on cannabis consumers' guns rights. There's a write-up. There we go. That's the end of that story.
That was it.
That's all she wrote, as they say. Isn't that the same as that's all she wrote? All right.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's it's a lot of words in there. It doesn't make sense, some of it, where they promote it as being good, and then they turn around and they have these silly laws against this.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on to the next story. Headline says.
Coming to us from Mugglehead Magazine, Portland VA opens psychedelic therapy clinic to treat mental health and substance abuse disorders.
Nice. The VA, Portland Health Care System, recently opened a psychedelic therapy clinic to treat veterans and conduct clinical trials. A ribbon-cutting ceremony was held by the Social Neuroscience and Psychotherapy Labs at the Veterans Affairs Organization's Vancouver campus in Washington on March the 18th.
It was attended by the Portland VA's director, David Holt. He took the time to thank Stephen and Alexandria Cohen Foundation for making the substantial contributions to the facility's establishment. Holt also acknowledged the lab's principal investor, Dr. Christopher Stauffer, and others involved.
We could not have done it without the support of the Stephen and Alexander Cohen Foundation, Stauffer said in a LinkedIn post. Steve Cohen is a renowned investor and head of the .72 hedge fund and has donated millions of dollars to the psychedelic research. There are currently 2 clinical trials underway at the new clinic. One is a study on psilocybin-assisted therapy for veterans suffering from methamphetamine addiction. The other is investigating of MDMA-assisted group therapy for veterans with PTSD.
Stauffer says the methamphetamine use disorder is one of the most challenging conditions to treat. The study aims to find the optimal psilocybin dosing regime and the best ways to provide subsequent integrative therapy. All 6 veterans from each cohort participating in the group therapy trial will start with individual MDMA session. It will then be followed by group integration therapy and usage of the medicine facilitated by 4 therapists.
There you go. I think it's great to see that these studies and the fact that the patients are veterans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not over that though.
Pardon me?
I said the
What's
story
that?
wasn't done.
Oh, wasn't it? Oh, I shut it down. Oh, I thought it was done. Oh,
It's okay.
It's not the first time. And it probably won't be the last.
Yeah, no, Mugglehead does that. They'll put in the little, read more, but then you got to keep scrolling. I mean, they do that to fool us.
Okay, well, like I said, it's good to see that they're helping the veterans.
It is. It's great to see.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, on to the next story. Hope we finish it. There we go.
Heading over to StratCan, Surrey, BC, once again considering plan to allow cannabis stores.
Yeah. The city of Surrey, BC, which had banned cannabis stores since the beginning of legalization, will again be considering a proposal to allow up to 12 cannabis stores in the city. In 2023, Surrey City Council began exploring the possibility of allowing cannabis stores, directing city staff to develop a plan. In July of that year, council sent a plan back to the city staff to be reworked to address some councillors' concerns.
A survey then went out to the public about the proposed plan for up to 12 locations in the city, 2 for each of 6 distinct communities. And then they list them there. The survey results are now available, and Surrey City Council could address the report as early as today, April 8th, which is the next scheduled council meeting.
Under the proposed plan, city staff would inform retail cannabis applicants of the results of Surrey's request for expression of interest selection process. Up to 2 applications would then advance to City Council for consideration of their site-specific rezoning, including a public hearing before the possibility of license being awarded. Retail licenses also must receive approval from the federal government.
More than 4,000 people responded to the survey, with 96% living in Surrey. About 68% of respondents said they supported having 12 or more cannabis stores in the city. The 47% who strongly disagreed with the proposal said they felt setting a limit of 12 stores was too little, while just 38% of those who disagreed said it was too many. There were similar results with respondents when asked about the proposed limit of no more than 2 stores per community in Surrey.
Those supporting more stores in Surrey didn't necessarily mean they were cannabis consumers, though. Of those who supported having 12 or more stores in Surrey, just over half said they visit stores in other communities or purchase cannabis online, and 51% said they would buy from a store in Surrey. All right, that story is over. I just checked the bottom of it to make sure. All right, we got on time. Oh, we still got 10 minutes left. Good stuff. There we go. Got the next one lined up.
Yeah. Coming to you from Ganjapanur, Hawaii House Finance Committee kills adult use cannabis bill.
Huh? What? What? The Hawaii House Finance Committee has killed an adult use cannabis legalization bill, KHON2 reports. In a statement, committee chairman Kyle Yamashita cited numerous concerns regarding the implication of the bill and the prevailing no votes from committee members expressed on the House floor.
The measure had passed its second reading in the Senate, while Yamashita noted was the furthest progression of an adult use cannabis bill in the state. Representative David Tarnaz, one of the main sponsors of the legalization, told KHON2 that the measure made it so far because of the hard work of the Attorney General and the House of Representatives and the Senate working together with the Department of Health to find the best practices from other states.
Well, just so you know, they plan on introducing the bill again in the next session. So it's not a done deal yet. Cannabis legalization could still happen in Hawaii. It's just not happening today. That's all.
No, fingers crossed it still happens.
Yeah, exactly. All right, on to our last story of the day. As I get it lined up here. All right, you ready? Here you go.
Coming to us from Marijuana Moment. Schumer says passing marijuana banking bill is part of the Senate's busy agenda in the weeks and months ahead.
Excuse me, months? It's been years now. Come on, get this. It's just so frustrating. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is retaliating his intent to pass legislation to safeguard cannabis banking as part of a busy agenda that he hopes to achieve in the weeks and months ahead, though he again stressed the need for bipartisan cooperation. In a Dear Colleague letter on Friday, Schumer says the Senate has a variety of priorities when members return from the state work period next month. He said, "We have the opportunity to make progress on bipartisan bills, including advancing the Secure and Face Enforcement Regulation Banking Act," which has gone from being called the Safe Banking Act to the Safer Banking Act.
There are many important bipartisan issues this Congress could address this year, and I hope our Senate Republican colleagues don't allow the ultra-right wing of their party derail progress on the bipartisan bills, the majority leader said. In the weeks and months ahead, we have the opportunity to make progress on bipartisan bills that enhance our national security, advance online safety for kids, and promote innovation, expand the child tax credit, work on the path forward on TikTok legislation, combat the fentanyl crisis, hold failed bank executives accountable, address rail safety, ensure internet affordability, safeguard cannabis banking, there we are, outcompete the Chinese government, lower the cost of prescription drugs like insulin while expanding the access to healthcare and more. There's a lot in there that I agree with, but of course the Safeguard Cannabis Banking Act is definitely the one that we're reporting on today.
Exactly. Now, in his letter, he says, I have said repeatedly this Congress, with divided government, bipartisanship, and compromise are the only ways to make progress and get things done that will help the American people. Democrats have had an ambitious agenda to help the American people, and if our Senate Republican colleagues are sincere about passing bipartisan legislation and willing to reject the extreme mega demands, we are ready to work with them to find compromise and get as much done as we can. Yeah, we're all waiting. This is one of the multiple examples of Schumer describing his attempt to pass the marijuana banking legislation, which cleared the Senate Banking Committee last September. It is now pending action on the floor before potentially moving to the House, which has passed earlier versions of the proposal in some form 7 times.
Yeah.
So when you hear some sarcasm in my voice, this is why. They passed it 7 times in the House.
Yeah. This is time number 8.
Yeah. He also recently asked people to show their support for the Safer Banking Act by signing a petition. And as he steps up his push for legislation, the poll released last month by the American Bankers Association shows that roughly 3 out of 5 Americans support allowing cannabis industries access to the banking system.
Yes. In the latest Dear Colleague letter, Schumer also criticizes the House Republican Study Committee for putting out a dangerous and disastrous budget plan. The same panel also recently urged the GOP caucus to oppose cannabis banking measure as well as separate bipartisan proposal to prevent security clearance denials based on past cannabis use. Representative Nancy Mace, who also sits on the committee, said on Wednesday that if Republicans want to keep the House, they should pass the cannabis banking bill, arguing that there are votes to approve it.
Schumer told Marijuana Moment last month that the bill remains a very high priority for the Senate, and members are having very productive bicameral talks to reach a final agreement. Senate Banking Committee Chairman Sherrod Brown also said last month that passing the Safer Banking Act off the floor is a high priority. However, he also recently said in a separate interview that advancing the legislation is complicated by current House dynamics.
House majority.
It's just.
Sorry?
Yeah, did I close it off early again?
It's okay. We're at that time anyway.
Okay.
There's a couple more paragraphs, and I'm sure it just continues to say a lot of the things.
Yeah, it was jumping on my end. So, but,
then marijuana jumps all over.
It's just a nonstop back and forth. Come on, just do it. There in the U.S., it's so ridiculous when they've got 40 states that have medical cannabis, and basically half of them have got legal recreational cannabis.
Yep.
It just does not
decriminalize it and make it easier on everybody. We don't just need the Safer Banking Act. We need you to just legalize it, decriminalize it, do something.
Correct. Get up to snuff with everybody else. You're getting a little bit behind there in the U.S. As far as federally, they're making strides down there state-wise, but geez. All right, anything you gotta say before we sign off?
Just have a great week. I won't see y'all for a couple of weeks. I've got my shows, my podcast tomorrow, and then I am off to Vancouver for 420.
Yeah, for 420. So you won't be back until like the 24th. So we're looking at, you'll be gone for 2 weeks, a little more than 2 weeks.
I will. But then I'll be back.
Yeah, exactly. All right. From the legacy420.com, that's our Pace News report for April the 8th. Thanks to our buds at Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, Limestone City Hydroponics.ca, and the legacy420.com. In closing, I'd like to say, thanks for tuning in and thanks for watching. And don't forget to educate, medicate, and do not incarcerate. Now I just went and moved my screen and I got to find the closing, but there it is. Bye-bye. You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, legacy for 20, it's so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420 enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyndonega Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more. We've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420. We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.